baby, do you understand me now? Sometimes I feel a little mad, but don't you know that no one alive can always be an angel? When things go wrong, I seem to be bad. I'm just a soul whose intentions are good. Oh Lord, please don't let me be misunderstood.
Hello. Welcome to TSC Talks, the podcast where we talk about tuberous sclerosis complex and other related chronic diseases and those affected. My name is Jill Woodworth and I'm your host. Today we're on episode 22. My guest is Hilary Savoie. Hilary is a lot of things. An amazing guest is the first one. She's a writer, a rare disease community engagement consultant, a nonprofit founder, a mixer of oddball cocktails, and most importantly, she is the mother of Esmé. Esmé is a medically fragile, developmentally delayed, and a bit of a scientific mystery. She has some genetic conditions. She has seizures. Drew me into reaching out to Hilary was her article about PTSD. PTSD helps parents keep their medically fragile children alive, but at what cost? I've been talking about this topic for a while in forums and blogging a little bit about it. I know there's a lot of people out there that are listening and feel as if they can understand the PTSD experience as a tuberous sclerosis complex parent or caregiver watching their children go through seizure after seizure, administering difficult medicines, feeding tubes, brain surgery, other procedures and surgeries, doctor's appointments, MRIs. Do I need to go on? I think you people understand this as much or more than many and any. So this kind of was a coming of age type of thing for me because I realized that I've been dealing with a lot of PTSD personally. I've kind of known it's there under the radar. Really now being able to confront that and deal with it. And doing this podcast has been tremendously healing, growth-inducing, and painful. Every guest I've had on, I've felt some kind of a relevant connection with and opened up parts of me that I'd forgotten were even in there, that had been dealing with certain levels of my children's issues, my own personal issues at the same time. So I was really dealing with some deep self-analysis while doing this podcast. Anyways, it's been a wonderful experience, and I'm continuing on, but I thought I'd share that, and Hilary really hit home. I am so grateful again for her bringing this work that she's done, researching this topic, opening her mouth, being brave and honest about her own challenges to the forefront. And I won't keep going on with the intro. I do want to thank so many of you out there for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday. I may have another podcast up before then, but if not, whatever you're celebrating this year, make it meaningful. Have those conversations. Tell the people that you love them. So this goes out to my friends and family who have been such a support through all of the challenges, personally, with my children. I think we all have many people in our lives that support us, no matter what we're dealing with. And I will not blather on because I've been told that my intros that are long, people skip over. So without further ado, I am grateful to have on Hilary Savoie. Check her out on romper.com. I'm going to post a lot of links on the Facebook TSC Talks page as well as on other social media outlets. Thanks so much, and take it away, Hilary.
Hilary, thank you so much for being on my podcast to talk about, are you ready to go? Just about? Yeah. Okay. Thank you for being on the podcast, being willing to talk about this extremely important topic, PTSD and caregivers and parents and how that can be addressed, resolved, and explored. So thanks for being on. And why don't you go ahead.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great. Go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself. Give me a little brief background and how you got into this work.
So I am a writer and advocate and the founder of the Acute Syndrome Foundation. And most importantly, I'm the mom of a really amazing little girl named Esmé, who will be 8 in January. And Esmé has multiple genetic mutations that contribute to her having a whole series of health and developmental challenges. And so when Esmé came along, I was in the middle of finishing a doctorate in communication and rhetoric, which I wound up having to put on hold for a time. I did finish it when she was around 3, with a lot of help.
Excellent.
But Esmé really led me down a path of needing to explore, first of all, for her own well-being and safety, as well as for the well-being and safety of the communities that we're a part of, needing to explore advocacy around healthcare, around rare diseases, and doing just a lot of writing. She's this brilliant person in the world, and I often find myself saying that when I decided to become a mother, I expected that my job would be to prepare my daughter to be in the world, and that would be what being a mom was. And the circumstances of Esmé's life have meant that actually my job is a little bit of that, but it's also much more preparing the world to be welcoming of people like Esmé in it, and educating the world about who she is and what's so brilliant and wonderful about her.
That's a huge shift.
Yes. So I started blogging about her when she was about just 18 months old or so. Her seizures were really out of control at that point in time, and we essentially spent, half the week in bed. And so I would just kind of type with one hand while holding her. And that's kind of where the writing started. And the advocacy happened perhaps a bit more slowly and naturally, but kind of culminated with me starting the Cute Syndrome Foundation in 2013.
Tell me just a little bit about that in brief.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Cute Syndrome Foundation was started in order to fund medical research for, at the time, we had only one genetic diagnosis for Esmé, but the foundation was set up to be a bit more flexible because we knew that she was likely to have other diagnoses down the line. So it started with PCDH19. Okay. And upon her diagnosis with a mutation in SCN8A, we began to fund medical research and provide family support for the SCN8A community. And the foundation has remained focused on SCN8A really exclusively since then, because the children with SCN8A are really incredibly fragile. In fact, just last month we lost 2 infants in the matter of a week. And the population is about 350. So
350.
Yes.
That's
so
incredibly rare.
Yes. So 2 losses, that's a huge part of our community. And so that's the focus of the foundation. Esmé also has subsequently been diagnosed with mutations in TBL1XR1 and MAP3K7.
TBL1XR1 and MAP. Okay. Now, how did you come about when did you find out about her differences and challenges as far as symptoms, when was it during pregnancy or was it after?
Yeah, it's,
I don't want to drag you through it too much, but just a little colorful background.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So our first indication that something might be different about Esmé was at our 20-week ultrasound. She did have several anomalies that were likely to suggest a genetic mutation of some sort. We did do an amnio at that time and couldn't find any causation at that point in time. And so I was really prepared to be having a healthy baby. But when Esmé was born, really within, a matter of seconds to minutes of her birth, things started to become real. She struggled to breathe. She was very floppy. She didn't really make much noise. She was transferred to a NICU about 10 miles away from the hospital where she was born, around 5 hours after her birth. I discharged myself against medical advice 6 or 7 hours after she was born.
Oh, my goodness.
So that I could be with her. and really received no more medical care whatsoever after that. And this is another issue that's really rampant in this community that we need to be aware of, is that health insurance doesn't allow mothers to be transferred with babies who are going to NICUs.
I never thought of that.
Which is really criminal, frankly, and dangerous. So that happened.
Mm-hmm.
We got her out of the NICU after about a week, and I was sort of still very naive and thought, well, we'll just get her stronger. She'll be fine. She's
Mm-hmm.
just kind of tiny. And
Right.
and then when she was 3 months old, she had cardiac and respiratory arrest that resulted from her having aspirated her food, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So she was drinking from a bottle, breast milk,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually formula because she wasn't growing. And so she was put on prescription formula. And at that point, what she was aspirating became too much for her body to handle. And it caused respiratory arrest and then subsequent cardiac arrest. She's been tube fed ever since.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the source of, for me, a huge medical trauma. She literally turned blue in my arms. And
Wow. I'm listening to you, and my hair is standing up on my.
Yeah.
That's a lot. It's a lot to
is.
take on.
It is, and that was really the point at which we started fully understanding that there was something that was quite different about
Mm-hmm.
our daughter. And a few months after her cardiac arrest, she started having seizures, and so there was really never
Never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment, and never a point at which she was healthy, or I really should have been convinced that things would be sort of typical.
Uh-huh.
There was a lot of denial, of course.
Of course. Oh, yes. I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the process, I believe. So you started the Cute Syndrome Foundation. Go from there. You have this daughter that's incredibly medically fragile. You're dealing with your own process of accepting this new path for yourself and your whole life. Walk me through how you got to the point where you started this project that we are going to talk about.
So I think, in a way, this is a project that has been brewing since those very early days.
Mm-hmm.
When I stop and think about all of the advocacy work that I started doing very early on, I actually think it was a very well-honed avoidance technique. I threw myself into advocacy as a way to avoid holding still and realizing what had happened. And in some ways, I think it was a brilliant coping technique.
Yes. I had many less brilliant ones of my own, so I'm going to give you kudos for that.
Yeah, well, it's great because it felt like I was making meaningful change and
Mm-hmm.
protecting my daughter.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think that it was also a way to ignore what was happening internally for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, being a part of these communities and being very active in a number of communities, both are, with the foundation and with our various genetic diagnoses, and also active in, all sorts of other special needs communities and advocacy groups. And really what over the course of those years I was seeing over and over the impact of these traumas
Mm-hmm.
on the people who are my friends and my acquaintances, seeing how hypervigilance in these populations was harming their friendships, their relationships with their families, their relationships with their spouses, and how the symptoms of PTSD were influencing, for instance, how advocacy work was happening,
Mm-hmm.
and how groups were able to work together, or in many cases not able to work together effectively. And also in seeing in more recent time the response to healthcare changes or potential healthcare changes,
Oh boy.
and how frightening those changes were to the community and how mobilized they became, but also questioning how it is that the people who are most struggling in our society are the people who are then having to take on